Well, hello there, everyone. Here to show you the passion driving skills that talk about safety from pedestrians and then passengers. And you see right here is I went ahead and drew right here of an example right here of a car that's pulling up, to pick up you see some pedestrians. And a lot of times that we may think that like to be extra nice, of like if we see somebody walking, maybe on the side of the street, or if it's like maybe around an overpass or somewhere like that, that we may want to be kind of generous and offer them a ride as well. But go ahead and draw right here as if there was a driver, right here on the inside, and for the most part, that they usually say that like that as long as you recognize the driver and that knowing about that anybody that may say that usually go by the rules of saying is like don't talk to strangers, etc., etc. But knowing about that a couple times, if you were to be offered a ride by somebody, let's just say if you're walking along, you say that interstate, if this a lot of the activities I've done based on, let's say, for highways, but let's just say that I don't know, more likely they would probably say that with most kids though, that I'm like younger than the age of 11, that I don't think that you would maybe even see them walking along right here. Like if you have right here is an overpass right here, draw right here is using right here is the green right here. I'm like most of the overpasses and interstate highways usually would be like a green type color, and I guess that represents for like the highway, for the highway overpass or something like that. But that type of stuff, of course, I've seen on Google Map. But on your hand, at knowing about like you have like maybe a few street signs about right here, but you have right here is a car right here, and I'll go and draw right here as some examples right here, and if I can, I think it was the 2B pencil is what I used to draw some of these. But you see right here is I went ahead and drew right here is a picture of a girl and then a boy right here, and let's just say with a girl and a boy, if they would be walking around like I don't know if pick knowing about if they're related or if they're just best friends or if they're cousins or something like that. But let's just say that if they would be walking, and the place where let's just say if there was a parking lot about right here. Whenever I drew this, I was like, I don't know exactly about what's where, and how far is this from there or something like that. But let's just say if there was like a a supermarket at about right here. I'm like if they were just coming out of the supermarket, and then they were walking, and then within about I would say within about 5 blocks, and then somebody pulls up to them and offers them a ride, asks how you doing, where are you going, and then they offer to give you a ride. And a lot with most kids would probably say that they would walk, if it's a nice day outside, etc., etc. But knowing about that about most of the rules about if you have right here is a lane of traffic at about right here, and then right here's a lane. I guess most of the time with most interest ramps is it would be like say if it would be one main lane. But let's say you got a car right here, and I'll go ahead and draw right here as an example right here of maybe a biker, and then anybody that may want them, you may see a few bikers on the street, on the roads as well, like especially on the interstate highways, and talk about trying to draw the bikers. I'm like that you have a few bikers that could be on the road as well, and then right up here, and like say you got right here is like a station wagon, like say it's like other than a minivan. I don't really have an example of like a toy car for like a minivan, but I'll go ahead. We may see a few of these, like you say trucks. It's like I don't know if you call them I'm like the type of trucks, the kind that that delivers oil, and I'm like I don't know if they what you call these kind of trucks, but I basically know what they look like. Is knowing about that if we actually see one of these tanker, I guess you call them tanker trucks or something like that on the interstate highway. But if there would be anybody that would be walking around the highway, knowing about that there aren't too many traffic lights around there, like maybe a few of them, but other than that knowing about that usually that most parents would be concerned about that, and knowing about if you would be walking somewhere, and then they So people don't think it's very safe, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, that, yeah, which I'm sure most people understand that. And knowing about that you have right here is like a interstate highway, and let's just say that if there was a road that led to right here, if this was going like, say, north, if this would be going southbound or something like that, there would be maybe a traffic light at about right here. I'm like, yeah, and then maybe a few buildings, eating restaurants, about right here. But yeah, I'm like talking about between the north, south, and east and west, and I'm like, yeah, but the whole purpose about this right here is talking about, I'm like, yeah, for pedestrians. And I'm sure that, like younger kids, that, I guess not everybody, of course, can drive. Maybe they can drive, but maybe they just don't have a vehicle. But talking about from whenever the safest ways about, how to keep your kids safe and, pedestrians, and knowing about that if they're, maybe on vacation, that they could just be walking, and then somebody offers them a ride to go somewhere, and kind of like what I, remember, talking about, like, for like Test Drive Unlimited, that you have it to where that if you would be playing the game of Test Drive Unlimited, then you would have it to where that you offer somebody a ride if they were just getting out of the grocery store and they had a lot of groceries in their hand, and they you offered them a ride to where that they wanted to go. But in a lot of ways, though, that I'm like, yeah, that knowing about that if somebody offered you a ride, and that knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that what exactly does a lot of that mean? And if they're driving around town, does it really mean about that they really feel sorry for you, that that they're just being generous, and they want to offer you a ride for for no cost to you for wherever you need to go, and and I'm sure that there are some drivers like that, and they usually say that that for most of the time, for most safety precautions, that that knowing about, if you don't know this person, it's not safe to get in the car with them. They could maybe take you somewhere else. Such as maybe if it's a kidnapping case, or anything that such adoption, or like yeah, that knowing about, a lot of times that they say it's not a good idea to get in the car. It's like with somebody that you don't know, and actually you ask them that you would like to go here. You only had to. You're trying to walk somewhere within about 2 miles from where you are, et cetera, et cetera. But right here, you have right here's a car right here. Use it as an example, but I'll go and use this car right here, like the tires, of course, the front wheels, of course, that you had come off, but I'll just I talk about, like, yeah, it's like for a toy car, but on your hand, and knowing about it, with the car though, that basically that you have right here is that I'll go ahead and position the car at about right here, and let's just say that with the car, that if it would be pulling up at about right here, and if it had, like, say for all 4 tires, say that it's all for in good driving condition, that basically that you have it to where if there would be a car pulling up right here, and there would be 2 pedestrians at about right here, and basically that with these pedestrians, so that you have it to where that, yeah, the door, then the door that opens up right here. I'm like, the safest ways of how to pick up pedestrians, and then whenever they get in the car, in the back seat, and then the door closes, and then they drive on up on, say, on the road. And for the most part, that we may say that I'm like, yeah, that if it's making sure it's safe too, that knowing about from the type of vehicle, though, that if they somebody drives up to you, and then they ask, I'm like, yeah, that if you're driving, let's just say if you're driving about, and then they pull up right here, they pull up right there, and then somebody that would be right here, within that they would open up their door and be like, hey, like, would you like to have a ride? And then I'm like, yeah, they pull up to you, and it's like that they the safest ways, of course, of how to pull up to a pedestrian, that I'm like, yeah, that usually that they if they're going about maybe 15-20 mile an hour, and then they start slowing down, and then they have their emergency flashers on, and they pull up right next to you, and then I'm like, yeah, I'm like, anybody say that? Well, no, like making sure it's safe. Not that that they pull up safely right next to you, and then they open the door. Like they actually open the door, and then they offer you a ride to go somewhere. And knowing for the most part about the safest ways of how to pick up a pedestrian, and then for wherever that they pick them up to, and for the most part that they say that if you're going to have a few cars that are going to be driving up next to you and offer you a ride, and then go on pickup truck, etc., but on your hand too safe for a pedestrian. So but for the most part that they usually say that if it's really safe to pull up on the side of the road, I'm like, yeah, that especially maybe not in a way of traffic though. But the way I would think about anybody say that, yeah, other than using model cars as an example, maybe one with a few scratches and one with no tire, like with a missing tire, and a lot of times like anybody say that make sure that you got good tires, and on your hand to make sure that the brake lights of course work as well, and along say that with all the with the lights, and then knowing about that you got plenty of knowing about how you're parked, and knowing about if you're coming from this direction, and then you return and then get on the entrance ramp, get on the highway though. That a lot of times if you see somebody that you want to pick up, they usually say is to pull up next to them at about right here. I would say maybe about 5, usually about 6 or 7 or so feet from the curb, and ask them if they want to ride, and then it's like I offer to open the door for them, and then and take off. But a lot of times we better say that it's usually safe that knowing about if you know the person, you can be able to get in the car with them. But I'll go and use right here as an example right here of a car, a car that has doors that open. I'm like, this is one toy car that of course I've had to where it has a door that opens. But on the other hand, knowing about if we have a car right here, and then it pulls up right up next to you, and then it actually they say that like anybody say about that if you're walking, and then they pull up at about right here, and then they pull up at about right here, and then like pull up, and then it's like, yeah, hey, you want to ride? And then like the pedestrians would be about right here, and then they you walk up to the door, and for the most part that they usually say that for how the safest way of course how to handle something like this, if you're going to be offering somebody a ride, and then they say like, hey, would you like to have a ride, or hey, I'm a friend of yours, or somebody like that, somebody offers you a ride, and then they get in the car, you get in the car with them, and then they take you for where you like to go, etc. But for the most part, that knowing about with most vehicles though today, as you say that if ways of how to keep our children safe is if it's knowing about these people, if they are a friend of yours, or if they are just somebody that sees you, and the best ways of knowing about how safe it is like basically that we can maybe think about the safest ways of how they want to pick you up, and knowing about if they do offer you a ride, and from how it how it was handled, about how they pull up next to you and offered you a ride, and then they asked you about in a concerning way. If they asked you about you're doing all right, hey, would you like to have a ride? It's pretty hot outside, for how far are you going? But we may have a number of reasons to why maybe that for most of the time that maybe we would rather walk other than getting in the car with a stranger. But for the most part is that we may come up to a situation to the same thing that we may see in the grocery store, somebody that offers you a cart if you have your hands full of stuff, etc., and it's like anybody that may say that, I'm like, it's kind of interesting in knowing about how people meet, really. I'm like that you may meet at the coffee shop, or at the cafe, or maybe at the mall, somewhere like that, and then knowing that somebody that offers you a ride and from wherever you're going. But on your hand, and knowing about from how it was handled, and for the most part that if you see somebody walking though, that they usually say that there are some safety reasons for that. Like, if you see somebody walking, and that usually a lot of times that they ask you to make sure that you have your turn indicator on and go in a certain speed. If you see somebody walking, right, on a, and they may say though that I'm like, well, we can offer them a ride too. Well, I'm like, it's like on a nice day or something like that. If they're not alone, they may have somebody with them, and just knowing about that, for the most part, that if they be walking, and then all of a sudden it's like, they're walking and somebody pulls up to them and ask them if they would like to have a ride, but it's happened a couple of times with me that I said no a couple times, and anybody that maybe asks, it's like, if anybody that pulls up to you and offers you a ride to take you somewhere, and then sometimes you say no, no thanks, and then a lot of times, though, like ways of how to handle stuff, with younger kids, I know about ways of how to handle a situation like that, to where if somebody offers you a ride back from where you were going, and then knowing about that you usually don't take those rides, because I'm like, maybe you won't know them until you maybe get in the car, but for the most part, for most safety tips of anybody that may say about for how it was handled, if they pulled up next to you and said that hey, I need you to come with me. I need you to come with me. your mom's or your dad or somebody is in the hospital, or they were in an accident, something like that. If somebody pulled up to you and like what you call is like it's like maybe if they try to talk you in and they get in the vehicle, and ways to how to, of course, for self-defense. And for the most part, though, that I'm sure with most drivers, though, that they usually say that I'm like, if they're going to offer you a ride to take you somewhere, then a lot of times that they may say that there are some people out there that are generous, is knowing that they're just offering you a ride because they don't want to see you walking, having to walk in the hot weather, especially if maybe there could be rain reported in the forecast, etc., etc. But you have right here is a few cars right here, but on the hand too, to know about for the pedestrian, for the pedestrians, and then on the other hand too with passengers, is that for the most part, and knowing about that from whenever we driving in the car, and knowing about how safe we are from if we were a pedestrian and into a passenger, it's like to buckle your seatbelts, etc., etc. But just knowing about it, like, be careful on a lookout, as if there will be if somebody were to offer you a ride, and then more likely, what would you say? But for the most part, is knowing about that, people that pull up next to you and they offer you a ride, and I'm like, ways of how to handle it, just knowing about that, before you get in the car with them, is just knowing if they can ask. It's like, if you want to go ahead and ask them, I'm like, why you offer me a ride? There may be a few things that we may see maybe a little bit wrong about whenever situations that come up with, if you're walking and then somebody pulls up to you, like if the position right here, the car right here, and then all of a sudden, like, I can, hello, hey, I have a ride, like, they pull up right next to you. I'm like, and I can tell anybody here that there are maybe some drivers that you can kind of feel the wind too, that whenever they drive up to you and kind of like park at about right here, but they it feels like that whenever they drive up to you, that you can actually feel the wind, like that they were only about 2 feet from about it's like about feel like they almost hit you or something like that. But the way I would think about ways of how to that drivers, that they want to pick up any pedestrians, and a lot of times that they usually say though that it's more generous. It's like if the pedestrians were about right here, for them to drive up at about right here, and pull up at about right here, maybe if you was like if I can go ahead and draw right here just to show everybody that if there was enough room at about right here to where there was a car that pulled up halfway up to the curb right here, I'll just say that if you will be walking about right here, and then like say the door was closed, but you pull up right here, and then the car would pull up at about right here. I might talk about this, zoom, and then they ask you like, hey, would you like to have a ride? And then they open the door for you, and then it's like you talk to them, and a lot of times they say, well, what comes before and after? Knowing about, if they had their window rolled down, and then they offer you a ride, and then they open a door, and then they let you get in, and then it's like, and then take you for where you'd like to go, etc., etc. But knowing about that, they may say that, for the most part, with so for passion driving skills, and knowing about, for how, if it's going to be, picking up a pedestrian and taking them somewhere, or if it's going to be delivering packages, going on vacation, or maybe on just a drive somewhere, etc., etc. And knowing about that, really, that they may say that there is what you call a right or wrong way, of course, of how it's handled. But one of those right of ways is knowing about, as they say, for smart decisions. If you're just out, you're walking around, and somebody offers you a ride, or just walking around, and let's just say that ways of knowing about who the driver is, and knowing that yeah, for most part, that they may say that is it more dangerous for a pedestrian if you see a pedestrian walker maybe walking up on the side of the road, and then knowing that there ain't too many pedestrian crossings, and that not too many pedestrian crossways or anything like that. People not, if you don't think it's very safe for them to be walking somewhere, then maybe they may say show us some type of reason to that they care, knowing about it's not very safe, for you to be walking. Would you like to have a ride? So it's we may say though, if there's like what you call a 50-50, a 50-50 to where, if we do the math and knowing about 50-50, that there's a 50% or maybe 60 or 70% chance that more likely that somebody says it's too dangerous for you to be walking up on the street here, and then ask you if would you like to have a ride. But for the most part, that we probably say that if we're going to be driving and knowing about, if we see somebody that we may know, maybe on the street or somewhere like that, maybe on the side of the road, and then you offer them a ride. But for the most part, if it's going to be a boy and a girl, shopping, and then you see them walking, and you offer them a ride, and for the most part, that they usually say though that I'm like, yeah, that maybe not all drivers that may do it, but just knowing about to be careful, knowing about if you for how you walk, and of course how you drive. But other than that you have right here the detail what I do right here, and like with anybody that may say about for the passion driving skills, is knowing about that you have right here is the car, and from just how it happened, and like knowing about from how they pulled up, and then yeah, that the car that they were driving, and just knowing about somebody offers you a ride home, and then or a ride for where you were going, and they usually say, well, you'll get there much faster, like my car gets 20 miles per gallon, or they drove up in a real nice car, and they had enough room in their car for other passengers. And there may be a number of reasons why maybe people do it, but knowing about number of counts, knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that if you were to pull up to somebody and offer them a ride, usually that they usually say is to make sure that you pull over safely, like away from traffic, and knowing about as long as you have your turn indicators on, and then emergency flashers, to make sure people see you, and if you're going to be picking up somebody. But for the most cases, knowing about if you're going to be going from state to state, they may have the rules too about that. Really all depends on what goes on as well. But for the most part, is that knowing about is like to make sure that people are safe if they're walking or going shopping, etc., etc. But just knowing about is make sure it's everybody's safe, is knowing about the guideline, knowing about if we see something wrong, and knowing about is think twice before you do it. But on your hand, and knowing about is like for the passion driving skills to safe for the pedestrian and your passengers collectivity. And to also mention to any pedestrian walkers, if it's going to be children, knowing about is to make sure to look both ways before you cross, and then to make sure that before you do cross is that knowing about give yourself enough time, and enough, it's like feet, it's like inches, to be able to, from whenever you do cross, is knowing about, from where you're going and then from where you are, and then of course, look from behind, as well. But other than that, like I talk about, say for the for the passion driving skills, like top say for those say drivers, and top say to drive safe, and like say for the pedestrians, and of course the passengers, say collectivity.